So there's three questions you want to ask, I guess, anytime you're looking at the race, you know, and saying, is the pace predictable, right? I mean, could I even, like, do I even know based on who's entered, is the race predictable? If the race is filled with a bunch of first-time starters, I have no idea what the pace scenario is going to be, correct?
Right.
If a bunch of horses are coming off layoffs or starting, you know, first time at this surface and distance, I have no clue. So what we try to do is you'll see races where there'll be a bunch of horses not plotted, and you know those races aren't predictable. But also there's races that are just difficult based on the kind of the horses entered. You know, they just don't have a particular run style that fits or whatever. And this is where we use this thing called plot fit, and that's the one of our parameters. And the plot fit essentially tells you, is the race a good fit or not. So if you're saying, hey, I really want to understand the pace of this race, if it's a dark or light green, the race might be a little bit more able to be predicted versus if it's a yellow or red. When red, it's almost unpredictable. Horses just don't line up, you know, for whatever reasons, you know, that we're mixing it together. It's not to say you can't use a plot like that to try to upgrade or downgrade a horse, but I'm just saying in general, those races just don't have the same flow as the races that have the green. So one of the first things that OptixpLOT does, it's able to help you decide, hey, is this a race I really could understand the pace or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense.
Okay. The second component, you know, the second question I kind of always ask is, you know, okay, now I know that race maybe is predictable, you know, from a pace perspective as best you can, right? Jockeys don't get out of the gate, all those other factors, right? You just,
right.
But what is the expected pace, right? And so what we do is we use two components to try to determine the pace. One is contention and one is speed rating. So a race could have high contention and be a slow pace, right? You know, just a bunch of horses maybe with, you know, closer or, you know, they're just not, they're not early lead types. So they could be just a bunch field that kind of run around the track. The pace could be very stressful and contentious because the field could be bunched, but there's really no speed on. So we distinguish between the two. So the contention talks about how bunched or how much pressure we expect the early pace to have. And then the speed rating is kind of the rate of it, how fast it is. Does that make sense, those two differences, Joe?
Yeah, but what is so the speed rating is a 17. What does that tell me?
Okay, so here in the contention standpoint, we have just very broad categories. There's three. So one is a snowflake, which is that contention is going to be soft. The sun is like an average, and then the flame is potential for a high rate of contention, right? So those are the components. For the speed rating, anything that's kind of under 25 is normal or average. I'm sorry, anything between 25 and 50 is kind of average. Anything 25 or less is kind of light. The speed rating is light. So in the 17, in this case, we would expect with the snowflake and the speed rating of 17 is not a contentious pace with not much of a speed rating going on. So we would kind of obviously probably upgrade horses that are forwardly placed if they're in form and so forth. Anything over 50, and if you have something over 50 with high contention, you're looking for a meltdown. They happen maybe there's one per track per day of those types of races where you're looking for the closers to factor in. And that's where, you know, you got horses that could come from way out of it when those scenarios come. So
you could have a low contention rate, but a very high speed rate if there's just one burner in the race. That's
right. That's right. And you don't, what I say, you don't really know how that might unfold. Like if the horse has absolutely no finish, then you might want to look for horses, you know, what kind of horse is going to pick them up. Could be a horse sitting right off of them, or it could be depends on how much the other horse pressure the other horse wants to apply. That's when you start getting into the run styles of horses, and we'll get into that. But right. So this is not intended like, oh, and I don't have to do anything. This is intended to get you thinking, right? And to take out some of the drudgery of trying to figure this out. Like, you know, who's going to be in the lead, what kind of pace is going to be. It starts to get the drudgery out of it. So it's a tool to help you, you know, make an informed decision about the pace.
Let me ask you a basic question, going back a little bit. How do you come up with the actual pace? How does it evaluate the pace as far as, you know, one day the track might be super fast and they might go 44. One day the track might not be very fast and they go 46. Is it all raw times, or is there some creativity that's used to figure out how fast the horses are?
Yeah, no, we use we make our own speed figures, and we use the same types of things, variance and all the rest to come up with those types of figures.
Okay, all right, cool. That's I thought as much, because I know you guys are much more creative than just raw data. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing we do different than I've seen from other people is we have a way of also kind of a class, kind of a horse kind of run style need to be to the lead. We factor that into, so it's not just purely fractional numbers, because we find those in lots of instances to be inaccurate sometimes. So not lots of it, but it's even if you normalize them, their accuracy still is dubious. So we also like to use the horse's ability to run up close versus run behind. There's certain horses, and you can have a race like you get a $30,000 claimer and a $10,000 claimer. The $30,000 claimer comes out of a slower pace, right? And you say, well, the 10,000 comes out of a really fast pace, he's going to be on the lead. Ain't going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Right. So those are things I think we do the best at adjusting for that, but that's my opinion. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Got it.
Okay. So just by looking at the heading, Joe, you got an idea. Hey, this is a race that I could probably handicap from a pace perspective, and I have a sense of what the pace is going to be. Right? The run styles now. Okay. So what we do is we're kind of like BRIS. We do like an EEP, but we're not BRIS's EEP, because we look at it. We only look at data in a certain period of time, the run style. So if a horse is like over a year layoff, we may not be able to evaluate his run style. So he may not be up there. So we only evaluate horses that we feel like we can evaluate in terms of where their current run style is. So in this case, you have, this is another example. I'm sorry. I kind of mixed and matched things here. So this race has, if you look at the plot, has a yellow plot fit. The contention is average, and the speed rating is about average. Okay. So, in this example, right? So you have the early pace horses are going to be horses in quadrants 1 and 3, typically. Now 3 is, like I said, weird. You can have a closer in 3 too. It all depends. In this case, the reason I think that 7 is impressive, because that's the way he likes to run. So I would normally, if the 7 was a closer and this was a contentious pace, he would look better in quadrant 3 than he does, because what this tells me, he's a presser that likes to, stay forwardly placed. And so I think he would be at an advantage here, especially going through the second call where he's down there. If he was a closer, this race was contentious, I give him more of a look. So I wouldn't upgrade him, even though he's a big square and people just go, hey, he's a big square and he should have the best late pace. You have to look at the dynamics of the race, right? You have to look at the run styles of the horses, and this is what we try to do. And you'll see we do 3 colors for this, right? So we do green, red, and black. And the green says, hey, the horse, based on his run style, fits the way he maps today versus these horses. So that's a positive. If it's black, it's kind of okay. And if it's red, it means it's a mismatch. So if you look in this case, the 3 and the 6 are mismatches, because the 6 is a closer and he's a small circle in quadrant 4. So he needs to come from behind, but he lacks the late pace relative to this field. And then the 3 is similar, right? He's a presser. It looks like he's he's on the edge, okay? But again, he's a circle in quadrant 4. So that's a negative. So in this race, the 3 and the 6 look negative in terms of they're matching up their run styles with the way they're plotting. Does that make sense?
You said they were in black?
Are you seeing the colors or no?
Yeah, I'm seeing the colors, but the 6 is green and the 3 is like sharing a circle with the 4, which is red.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So you got to look, different colors. I'm sorry. I should have. So if you look at the bar up above where it says Optix RPM above the chart, right above the quadrant, you see numbers.
Oh, up there. Okay.
Right.
I see it. Yep.
The colors down there mean something different. Like these colors, we have now programmed them. We got a bunch of different versions, but in this case, Joe, the green meant the horse was less than or equal to 3-1. The ones are like mid-range, and the reds are long shots. That's the colors in the circles mean. That's what that means.
I got you. So you're looking at the bar at the top, not in the boxes.
Right.
Okay.
So,
got
so this would be a horse that we probably, especially the fact that he, at least on a morning line, he was he was expected to be less than or equal to 3-1. Be a horse we'd be looking to try to beat. Okay.
Right. Okay. Got it.
All right. So again, so the first thing we learned is, okay, this race looks okay. It's not red. We got a feel for it. Looks like the pace is going to be about average. And the thing that I would pull out of this, of anything, is I want to bet against the 6, right? The fact that, and obviously the 5 looks good here. But other than that, I'm not trying to do too much here. I'm trying to get the information that's going to give me some type of an edge. And you may interpret it, Emily may interpret it different, right? What I'm interpreting out of this, I want to bet against the 6 somehow. That's what I take out of this. So everyone, as you learn this, there's different things you can a way you can evaluate this, but that's how I evaluate this. So, in Ed's case, he might like the 7, okay? But if I hadn't seen something in the 7 where I've seen him where, like, if he can come from way back, I'd be concerned about the 7 in this scenario, because it doesn't look like he completely matches up. Now, if I've seen some in his past performances that he can close, then I'd be a little bit more forgiving. But if he needs to be forwardly placed, I might have a little concern about him keeping up in the second call. That would be the only thing.
So when you're looking at the odds, the morning line odds, the green is 3-1 or less. The orange is what?
It's anything less than 15-1, and everything over 15-1 is in red.
Okay, so there's a big discrepancy between. I mean, the orange could be 12-1 or it could be 7-2.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure that I got that right, because there's a big discrepancy in the colors.
It basically lets you identify favorites and bombs, and the rest are neither of those.
Right. So everything in the pink is a bomb.
Yes.
Based on the morning line.
Based on the morning line.
Yeah. Right.
If we know parks, it might not be a bomb, but the morning line says so.
Right. No. I mean, yeah, that's what you're using as a guide. I mean, you have to use something.
Let's go back to this example, because I just want to kind of keep looking at. I want to look at here's
John. I hate to derail, but while I'm thinking of the question real quick, have you thought about like a report, and maybe this exists in the notes, and I haven't availed myself, but like morning line less than 3-1 that appear in Q4 circles? Because right off the bat would be a huge, like, okay, I want to look at this race. They think this horse is going to be a potential favorite, and it's a Q4 circle.
Yeah, you could do that today. I mean, the rod allows you to do any filter on any of that kind of stuff.
The rod. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, I need to play around with that for
sure. We'll show you some of those reports, but I just want to get Joe into the basics.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So just moving along on this is, I just want to give you some, basic analytics around this, Joe, so you have a sense of, we're doing. So, just to go down these quick tips, the most reliable, we talked about this in triple races, have a green plot fit. Talked about the circles and squares. Quadrant 1, early pace, obviously, horses have the highest win percentage of any race, all right? And Q1 squares have the best. So you got Q1 circles, Q1 squares. Q1 circles win also. That has the highest rate of Q1 squares. Squares win typically like 1.5 times what the circles win percentage. So that makes kind of sense, right? Late pace horses, horses that are finishing are going to win at a higher rate, no matter where they are.
Yeah, especially if the horses that are finishing also have speed, right?
That's right. Then they become, doubly dangerous. Circles in quadrants like 3 and 4, and that would make sense, right? So these are horses that are going to have to come from something off of it, are typically really bad bets. They win at a very low percentage, most tracks. And we do a track profile for every track. So, some tracks may have some oddities, and you'll see that if you look at the stats for each track. Each track has a track surface distance stat associated with the quadrants. It tells you win percentage of squares, circles, all the rest. And that's online. That's available online as you're going through it. I was just talking about types of races. So high contention races, with high speed ratings, typically that's when quadrants 2 and 4 have their best chance of winning, right? Because they're able to come off the pace. Typically right. Quadrant 4 is really kind of up against it unless there's some kind of dynamic that's going to help them, close up on things, right? So they're usually a little bit up against it. And then, the opposite, when you look at a low contention, snowflake, speed ratings less than 15, that's where you might even start looking at circles, smaller circles in quadrant 1. They could win the race, especially if there's not a lot of contention in there. The example we're looking at, there's a lot of contention, right? You see the contentions of flame. The speed ratings a little bit on the, right at the high end of the average. So this race looks like it could have some late pace going, and the 4 and the 7 and the 8 look like the horses that might benefit from that. See, the 4 is an early pace horse, so he may get caught up in the early pace, while the 7 and 8 are pure closers, and the 6 is, but the 6 maps, wherever. I don't even know where the 6. Oh, I guess that's the 6. So anyway, so those are just some statistics, Joe. So you get a feel for the way this thing flows too, right? So it's easier to start looking and say, man, that horse is like 5-1. He's a small circle in quadrant 1. There's low contention. I need, from a pace perspective, he may be okay. And that's how I look at this, right? I'm just trying to figure out, quickly where there might be an edge in some races from a pace perspective. We talked about the run styles. Ed, I did for Oaklawn for 2018. What I did is I matched the run styles to the quadrants. Very interesting, right? So let me just, because I think this may help with this. Let me just show you what I did. So, everyone see this? Okay, yeah. So, did you see this?
Yeah, I see it.
Yes.
Okay, so what this tells me, so what I did is from 2018, this was Oaklawn Park, I took the run style win percentage by quadrant. So an E, which is an early type horse, right, need the lead. They cannot win, basically, if they're in quadrants 2 and 4, and that would make sense because they would be needing to come from behind. So they're basically a toss in quadrants 2 and 4. Quadrants 1 and 3, they're forwardly placed, so they can make the lead. Quadrant 3 is odd because there's sometimes if there's nobody in quadrant 1, a quadrant 3 horse who's sitting there by himself could be on the lead, right? Just because there's just no pace in the race. So that's why that quadrant 3, I did an analysis on quadrant 3. It's a blog up there. You'll see it. It's pretty good. It explains when quadrant 3 is more effective than when it's not. But generally, this kind of makes sense, right? You start to look at this and say, look, this horse is an E type. Essentially, he's got to be in quadrant 1 for him to really make any noise. If he's not, he's up against it. Right? So does that make sense? Does everyone understand the data? So this is, so of all the E's that ran, so 17%, the win rate, this is the win rate, 17% was the win rate for horses who were E's that were in quadrant 1. There was 0. They didn't win any races in quadrant 2. I think they won 1 race in quadrant 4. There weren't many. There were 32 of them, I think. And then I think they won a couple in quadrant 3. So of all the races they ran, 17% of they won were in quadrant 1. I mean, their win rate was 17%. That's kind of confusing.
Yeah, that all makes sense. But are these results surprising to you based on Oaklawn, or shouldn't these results, if you did it for every track, be somewhat typical for dirt races?
They're going to be typical.
Yeah, this should be somewhat typical.
Yeah, but what I wanted to show was, kind of understanding of the match between quadrant and run style. So right. So if you get a closer happens to, obviously it must be a paceless race. For some reason, or a class the horse is going down in class, and he maps as a square or whatever, or maps as anything in quadrant 1, he's got a very high win rate, right? So you don't typically say, oh, a closer doesn't belong in quadrant 1. But when they're there, when they're there, it's either because they have such a class advantage, or, right, there's just no pace in the race, and this horse kind of defaults there. And when you see that, it would make sense they would have a high win rate, right? Because a horse that could finish, that's going to be forwardly placed, is probably the most dangerous horse, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, at some point when you go through this, when you think the timing is right, like I'd like to see show a plot like that, like you did before, and say like how you and maybe how Ed or how Emily would evaluate that plot, so I can get I think I have a sense, but I'd like some confirmation on what I think.
Okay. A good source for that, Joe, you go to the, go to the race of the day, because Emily does it every day. Every day Santa Anita runs. Okay. So, perfect. Yeah. Perfect. That's a good thing, and there's old ones there. There's a bunch of this. In fact, let me just. Ed, is that data okay for what you're looking for Oaklawn?
Oh yeah, that's blockbuster.
Okay, and I did top 10 jockeys. I found a couple of things in them by quadrant too. So I thought that.
Oh, cool.
And then, I'm just going to add on race of the day. What I try to do with Santa Anita is a little bit different than like where most people are doing picks and like picking the winner. I try to do that obviously, but more importantly, I'm trying to just describe the plot, and I try to either pick like whatever the race is, if it's a stake race or whatever, I'll pick that one and kind of analyze the plot. But otherwise, one that I can kind of find a favorite that I think is a little bit soft based on the plot and why I think that way. So it is a lot of good information in the race of the day, more than just being like, well, this is who I think is going to win the race,
Yeah. That's exactly what that was the question I was asking, is in the race of the day, you're kind of taking us through your thought process, not only who you think is the likely winner, but who might offer value based on how the race shakes out.
Correct. Yeah, just kind of how I'm looking at the plot and evaluating each horse based on that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so Joe, maybe this is helpful. Interpreting the dynamics of OptixpLOT, is that kind of what you're looking for, right? So let me just take you through some of these. Okay, so I'm going to have the results here. So in this race, there's low contention. Low speed rating, the 7's a square in quadrant 1, the twos in quadrant 1 too. Again, we're not looking at this in terms of this is the only thing you need to handicap, right? So if you're looking at the form cycle, you might say the 7 ran his race, the 2 didn't run his race. I don't know, right? But basically in this race, I would say those are the horses who have an extreme advantage in this race. But just looking at the plot, they're both in quadrant 1 by themselves. The rest of the field's not. They're the only 2 horses that have any kind of early runs. Their run styles are early. I would say the 2 and the 7, to me, it depends on form, depends on price. Those are the horses I'd be looking at in a race like this, just pulling up.
Yeah, that's right. This is what you would call a standout race, which obviously you're not going to see. But this is a good way to explain it to me, because this is pretty black and white.
Well, you see more than these than you think when you scan. If you're just, hey, I'm focusing on fairgrounds, I may see 1 or 2 of these races a day. But we have a utility. You could scan all the tracks, and you may come up with 7 or 8 of these races.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the advantage of using tools and computers and stuff like that. So this race is a little bit, this race is a little bit more dicey, right? This is a little kind of there's some contention in this race. This race could go lots of different ways, and so this one's hard. So anybody, because I know the results. Anybody have an interpretation of this race? Ed, what's your interpretation of this race? I guess we lost Ed.
Sorry, I had on mute. I'm here. Can you give us a hint at the odds board?
I'll give you. I'll tell you one thing I would kind of look at is like 1 and 11. I would just kind of eliminate those guys.
Of course. I mean, I'm definitely willing to use either 5 or 6 at big prices. 8 I wouldn't use. It just seems like there's other closers that would get the jump, and I'm kind of a fan of that angle, first run type of cliche. If this were a pick and pray, let me put it this way, if this were a pick and pray and this was the only information I'd have, I'd take the longer price of 3, 5, or 6.
Is this telling me that there's no horses in the morning line less than 3 to 1?
Right.
Okay, so this is a contentious race even, so the
Even.
morning line favorite's probably 7 to 2 or something. Crazy wide open race on paper. The bigger the square, the stronger the kick, right?
Yes. So
And the bigger the circle.
the weaker the kick versus relative to the other horses. So
Okay. The bigger the circle, the weaker the kick. So yeah, I mean, I understand. This is what I was saying earlier about getting a plot like this up and having you guys interpret it for me. I see what Ed is saying for sure, because that, you would think those horses, who is it, the 5 and the 6, are
Right.
they're gonna get the first run. Although I would guess the 9 might be dangerous. I mean, yeah.
Nine looks dangerous. I think, so the point is, this is a contentious race, so this is a hard one. But I think Emily was on the right thing, right? So the 1, 4, and 11 kind of elimination. I think they're eliminated, right? Those horses you can cross out. So if any of them are taking any kind of money for any reason, unless we can understand what that reason is, that's a good thing. So for instance, this is the kind of race, if I handicapped the race, I looked at, I kind of looked at the notes and stuff, and I was like, man, I really like the 1, and then I look at this plot and I say, oh no. I may still try to make a case, if I could say, hey, look, these other races, this horse, you could excuse like 4 races, maybe. But the point is, you can quickly kind of get to something. And in this case, there's not a lot of things you can quickly get to other than the 1, 4, and 11 look vulnerable.
Do you kind of like do you kind of look at the numbers too, as far as, visualizing the trip, as far as, okay, this horse has a certain circle, but is buried on the inside, like, versus a horse might get that clear trip in hand, like the 5 or the 6, looks like they're going to potentially get that right trip.
That's right. So for in let's say a sprint, you have a bunch of horses, maybe there's a light contention race, and then you got 2 inside speeds, and then maybe that outside horse that can get like a stalking trip. The one thing I'll make sure is that can the horse press and go by horses? That's the other thing. So yeah, I mean, Joe, you don't stop handicapping like you always do.
Right.
This is trying to take some of the it gives you more time to do what ifs, and the better we get, and the more we kind of get this more comprehensive, the less what ifs you have to do, but you still have to do the what ifs. There's no tool out there that's going to predict racing. Just period. I'll say that right now. All we can do is try to take some of the drudgery out of it, make it a little bit more fun, and get you looking at things that you might not catch. Because if you go through a racing forum, all that raw data, you're going through it, it's like, I just find personally the reason we did this is we needed something more visual to help us kind of get the answers faster. That's kind of what we did.
Yeah, right on. So who wins this race?
I don't know. Oh, here we go. So the 9 won. The 1 ran really well. So the 1 might have had he was the speed of that group in quadrant 1, but the 9 won, and I guess the 2 ran 3rd, and the 3 ran 4th. So
the 9 was the one that so the little box in the first quadrant won. What did the horse pay?
I don't know.
$10.
Probably good. No, probably. I think he paid better than that.
I'm looking at the chart. He paid $10.
Oh, $10. Okay, there you go. Hey, Churchill Downs too. Sure, you probably handicapped this race.
What was the horse's name?
Joe, I looked at my notes. You picked the 11 in that race.
I did?
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
All right. So here's
the winner. What was the winning? Who was the horse?
St. Patrick.
Okay.
Mena up, spinning for home was 17-1. That's the one.
Yeah, that was a race from last year, not this year.
Yeah.
Right.
And Mojo Street, who was third, was 12-1. So I actually probably would have ended up on that horse at 12-1, given the plot.
You know, Joe, I'll probably, what I'll do is I'll push you back, your subscription back a year so you can see some of the old races and see the results. Because you could do this yourself. You can go to you can start looking at races, and then, you know, we keep the results out there. So if I go back like a year, you'll be able to see races a year ago, and races you might have handicapped at Churchill and stuff.
Okay, cool.
That's how I learned when I first started using plot, is I went back and just started like handicapping old plots. And I still do that actually for like a new track. I'll kind of just look like a track I don't play all the time or something like that. I'll look back at the plots and see if I can find some type of pattern, and just kind of try to get a feel for that new track based on the plot results.
Yeah, right on. No, that seems very valuable. I mean, obviously, like, you know, doing Fairgrounds for the second year now, and obviously doing Churchill since 2015. You know, wouldn't say I'm a big track bias guy, but I definitely use it, and I definitely think there's situations where it's fairly defined. To be able to incorporate this with that, like,
Yeah.
when we get to the trips too, how that all plays into this as well.
Yeah, I'll show you that in a second. So anyway, I mean, you can take a look at all these old races. You know, you'll get a better sense. I mean, we can keep doing these, but do you want to keep doing these, or do you want to kind of move on to take a look at
let me try to interpret the plot.
Okay, great, good.
Okay, so right now you've got the one that's on the screen right now. You've got a 7 horse that's higher than 15-1 in the morning line. That's in quadrant 1, but is also a box.
Right.
So that, I mean, that to me looks like, if I'm not reading this incorrectly, that horse looks like the horse to beat, and it's higher than 15-1.
Yeah, possibly. Now, if you look at this race and you say to yourself, okay, how do they like to run? What's the contention? And what's the speed rating? So what this says...
I wasn't looking at right. So the contention, it's high, it's a high, is the Sun a high? That's a medium, right? Level of contention?
Yep.
But it's a fast race. So those top 3 horses are all fast.
They're going to be winging, right? So... and then, you know, the thing is the 7's going to be chasing, right? Because the 6 needs the lead. So they'll probably, it doesn't mean easy, they'll get it, but most of the time, right, when he's going to commit. So they're going to go fast. So that's one scenario is you can see these 3 chasing each other into oblivion. The 2 and the 6 don't stay up, but the 7, if he's able to sit off of these horses, right? And that's a possibility. If no one goes with the 6, that's another possibility, right? So those are the scenarios. You know, the pace is going to be fast. And then the closers in this race, because the pace is hot, are the horses that could come off the pace of the 1, 4, 5, and the 3. 3 is more of a presser type. So the 1, 4, 5 are your closers. Any of those, like those horses could sit a good trip to me in this race. So this race.
How is the one a closer if he's a circle?
Well, that's his run style, right? He likes to close. He's a presser closer, right? You got to look at their run style. Again, how they map, right, is different. So in this case, he's not mapping well because he's a closer and he's a circle. But that's the way he likes to run. So,
right, but he's a smaller circle, so he's going to finish a little bit better than the 2 or the 6 would.
Right. So, if he's just off of, like, if he kind of finds himself, like, kind of off and ahead of the 4 and the 5 in a good spot, whereas the 3 looks, probably preferable in that case, right? So this race is really hard because, it could go lots of different ways. But if I would look at this race, if I had a strong opinion on I don't know about the 7, but 7 obviously, and then the 1 and the 3, I would be curious about even But since the 1 is kind of a favorite, I'd be looking at maybe the 3 as someone who could pick up some pieces. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I'm reading that right.
Yeah. So what happened? I have no idea.
Again, it all depends. Is this a 2-turn turf race? Probably not with a field of 7. But if it's a 2-turn turf race.
Yeah. There's another dimension to this, and it didn't play in here, Joe. So let me go back. Okay, this is what happened. So what happened was there's 2 ways to look at the plot. One is standard, and what standard means, did you see it's up here, Joe? It's I can't use my mouse for some reason. Up in the right-hand corner, there's a green box, and it says plot standard underneath. Do you see that in the header? Right, the header information to the right of the header information, right below previous and next race.
I see a plot standard, yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 basic plots, and what we do with the plot program that we sell in Brisk is you get both standard and surface and distance. And so what that means is standard means we're plotting more for recency. So it may not be, so today's a turf race. We may be plotting dirt races in that mix, just because we want to give you a sense of, is the horse in form or what have you. But we also have a surface distance plot, which we use the surface and the distance as, we only use races that are aligned with today's surface and distance. So in this case, you see the result. Okay. So look what happens to this when we go surface and distance. This is the plot with surface and distance. The 7 drops out because the 7 is never on the turf.
Okay.
Right. The 1 moves the 1 up to square right off the 2 and the 6, and then you got the 3, 4, and 5 below the y-axis. So that looks like
showing me this. I would think that the 1 should be in a perfect spot, right? Yes. And the 6 should last longer than the 2. And then it's just a question of, you think if the pace is going to be ridiculously fast, then maybe you could go to the 5 looks like the 5 might be over bet according to this.
Right. Correct. Good assessment.
Okay.
Good assessment.
Yeah, and again, it's just, and again, for me, like, I know, being at fairgrounds and being at Churchill, like, I know these horses individually. I know a lot. I mean, obviously you don't know physically how well a horse is doing. You can try to guess.
Right.
But when you know the horses, and then you can incorporate this kind of information with your knowledge base, which I'm intimately involved with these races, like, it's...
Exactly. Yeah. So in this case, the 4 actually won. The 4 was the horse that the 1, and then the 5 finished second. The 1 was third, actually.
Okay.
So let me see if I got another one. Here's the one where a circle 1 was a low contention. So you can't ignore the circles in quadrant, and again, quadrant 1. Another example, it's kind of a little bit off the pace, the 5. This was high contention, high speed rating. This is where, like, you might start looking at, I told you, quadrants 2 and 4. This is where they're most effective, that they're going to be anytime. It's going to be when you have this high contention, high speed rating.
Okay, there's the speed rating, 33. 33.
Yeah. This one was 50. So anything over like 50, even 40. But anything over 50 is 50 and above is you start getting into meltdown category. And then this one, wide speed rating, square and quadrant, 1. That's obvious. Even though the horse, remember the run style of this horse was a closer. Presser closer, so big advantage those horses when they're mapped like that. Probably. All
right, yeah. I think I got a pretty good understanding of this now. You said quadrant 3 was the hardest one to understand, and I guess when I start looking at this and I start seeing how the races play out, I think you'll have a much better understanding when you can apply it.
Yes.
apply it to reality, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and Joe, go in this section here. I'll send you the link. There's a video on quadrant 3. I think it's pretty good. In terms of like when quadrant 3 is most effective and why.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to do with the dynamics in quadrant 1. So if you don't have a lot of quadrant 1 activity and you got a quadrant, quadrant 3 is okay sometimes if it's contentious and the horse is a closer and he's presser closer and he could come from off the pace. That's one scenario. But the other scenario on horses that have early pace, if you see sometimes in Saratoga in those turf races where there's no quadrant 1 horse and there's a big there's a square in quadrant 3. That was the Derby a couple of years back when I forgot which one what's his name's horse, Fletcher's horse. There's a big square in quadrant 3, and there was really no one in quadrant 1, so it was like it was kind of like not really a lot of pace, and if the horse is able to get positional speed and take the field, he can kind of re-break and
right. That's a good example.
Yeah, it's a good video. It'll explain all that to you. I think it's
okay. Cool.
All right, so I think you got at least look, like I said, it's a learning curve. Any questions, you just email me, right? You can send examples and stuff. That's the best way to do it. Just email me. You got my email, and or if you got questions, Emily's out there too. So any one of us you get, that's fine. So I want to show you